take control of your finances. Gain insights from top industry professionals. Financial topics that matter to you from your go-to resource. This is Right on the Money with your host, Dennis Mattern.
Hello and welcome to Right on the Money, the show that features financial advisors, insurance professionals, and fiduciaries who discuss financial topics that empower you to take control of your finances. I'm your host, Dennis Mattern. We are so glad you've taken time out of your day to spend with us. I want to remind you, of course, that you can watch full episodes on our YouTube channel or at rightonthemoneyshow.com. Our guest, a very special friend of the show, Terry Dupont. He's the founder, Chief Success Officer of Dupont Wealth Management. He also is the Managing Director of Redwood Tax Specialist, a man who's been around the block, a man who knows his way around financial statements. Terry, great to have you here today.
Thanks, Dennis, for having me.
It is always a pleasure. Now, we are going to talk about a book that you've put out, and the name of the book is Holistic Retirement. And this book is fantastic. And I have to say, after reading it, my first question for you, why this book? Why now?
Excellent question, Dennis. Most of this information in the book has been pertinent for some time. But over the last decade or so, things have really changed in this country economically, and especially in the retirement planning space. The conventional wisdom that's been used for the last 30, 40 years just isn't working very well anymore. And so it's time for people to brush off the dust of their current retirement plan and make sure that it's in tune with what's going on with the highway of retirement right now.
So your practice is fascinating, and it's been a pleasure working with you through the years and watching your practice just continue to grow and grow and grow. You work with individuals, you work with business owners, and your ability to save them on their taxes is just insane, that percentage. But then also you advise CPA firms to help them with tax planning. So a question I have for you, with all your experience, what challenges do you run into working with the average American on thinking about 30 years of retirement?
That's an excellent question, Dennis. And what I found in my 43 years of being in this industry is many people will spend more time planning a 2-week vacation than they will a 30-year retirement. A lot can happen in 30 years that won't happen in 2 weeks. Okay, so when you plan for your retirement, you have to plan for all of the possible circumstances that might come up in retirement. And using the old conventional wisdom approach doesn't account for all the things that can happen in retirement, especially what's going on in the world right now. You need a fresh look of how to plan for retirement with what's going on in the world currently.
Now, you mentioned in the book, and I really like this, you talk about the long game. What do you mean by the long game?
Yeah, the long game is simply put, is executing steps today that set you up for long-term success for tomorrow and the next 30 years. By taking into account all of the things that are different in 2021 and 22 that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Now, you mentioned this is the other. I love the book, and if I had my copy here, what you would see is a lot of highlighting, scribbles. I dog-eared all over the place. But one of the things that's amazing with what you just said is there was I have to read it. I don't want to get it wrong. But if you went back, you mentioned in the book, if you go back 100 years ago, our version of retirement didn't exist. Basically, if you were alive, you worked.
Retirement didn't exist in this country until we invented Social Security in the 30s, okay? Because people worked until they died. Back then, when Social Security was started, it started at, around 60, somewhere around there. But life expectancy was only 60, 61. So they didn't expect too many people to be drawing Social Security. And now it's become an important part of everybody's retirement. It's like, it was meant to be a longevity insurance, and it's become a necessity.
Now, one thing the book touches on and is COVID. Because my gosh, can we have a conversation nowadays that doesn't revolve around COVID? But what I love about the book, is this book about COVID or what?
Well, it's about retirement planning, especially after COVID and what comes after COVID. And, this whole world has changed, and you can't have a successful retirement or have success at anything unless you adapt to change. And if you don't, you probably got to come up, the short end of the stick.
You mentioned in the book, and then you and I talking off stage a little bit, there was a term that I'd mentioned to you about it may be your first rodeo, but it's not mine. And over your career, over your time in the business, you've experienced different things in the market. You've seen inflation before, market crashes. We had high gas back in the Carter administration. And I think it's great that it's very important to have somebody to talk to about your finances that have seen these things before. I mean, COVID is hopefully a once, knock on wood, once in a lifetime thing. But you've seen things before.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to our whole theory, Dennis, of planning, in that, most people forget that, since 1900, we've had 22 recessions in this country, right? And they happen about every 7 to 8, 9 years on average. Sometimes longer than that, sometimes shorter, but it happens all the time. And we get through those things like we did through 2000 through 2002. 2007 into 2009, and boy, we're glad that's over. Then we forget about it. Well, it's going to happen again. I don't know when. We're going to have more market crashes. I don't know when, but that's why we consider ourselves wealth preservation wealth preservation specialists, and so we help our clients avoid those road bumps in the road.
When we come back on the other side of the break, we're going to dive into talking about the stimulus of 2020, how are we going to reduce this deficit and what you can do to protect yourself. You do not want to miss that. We'll see you on the other side of the break.